wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. All praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be on the last messenger of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's so nice to have all of you here today. Rehan, Soda, Maz, Mehdi, Fatma, Sabah, Ruwa, Hiba, Miriam. So Ruwa is also with Qabeelah Ittihaad. Nice to see you here, Ruwa. I'd like to offer you a very, very warm welcome to talk about this very important topic, strategies for success in turbulent times. And so I want to start today by telling you a story. And this is an incident that happened with me about 7 years ago. I was in my room and a family member called me and told me that they had been listening to the radio earlier that morning. And there was a program going on about young people who were leaving their faith. And they had a Muslim, they had a few Christian youth, they had a Jewish youth. And my family member who called me said that they recognized one of the voices. And as she kept listening, it confirmed her worst fear, which was that the Muslim person that was on this show was someone that we both know, one of our relatives. Even though she heard the whole interview, she still couldn't believe her ears. And so she went on to the show's website to confirm. And there she saw his picture and his name. When she told me the story, it was really gut-wrenching, to personally know someone who had not only left the faith, but publicly went on to declare that. And at the time, I had just started my formal studies in Islam. It was, I think, just about a year or so in. And I just felt really helpless. This is someone that I was no longer very close to, but, I wish that there was something that I could have done to prevent that. And I think it planted a seed in me for the future to say that, this is very real, this crisis of faith that so many youth are facing. It's not just a theoretical problem, it's a very real problem, and it can happen to any family, anytime. And so that became one of my motivations for doing the work that I do today, which is helping Muslims feel confident of their faith and their Muslim identity while living their best life. And so toward that end, over the next several years, I pursued a higher diploma in Islamic Studies. So I learned Islam formally with scholars. And then I also worked for a research institution called ISPU, where I studied the contributions and the challenges of American Muslims. And so I took all of my knowledge in these various areas, and what I decided to do was create a system, a framework that American Muslims could use in order to not only hold on to their faith, but also succeed in every area of their life. That became my life's mission, my passion. And so what I did was I took my knowledge in the area of Islam, as well as American Muslims, as well as personal growth. So personal growth is something that I had been studying ever since I can remember, as long as I was a kid, actually. It's been over 25 years. My entire adult life, I've been studying personal growth formally. And so what I wanted to do was put together a system that American Muslims could use that allowed them to be unapologetically Muslim while living their best life. And so what I developed was what I call the 5 C's of personal growth. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. The 5 C's of personal growth are a system that American Muslims can use that affects every area of their lives, because we know that there are lots of personal growth programs out there, but most, if not all of them, are developed from either an agnostic or a secular, and sometimes an atheist perspective. And so we really have to pick and choose which elements of those are helpful to us as Muslims and which ones we have to abandon. And then we have lots of Islamic programs that give us the knowledge that we need. But what I was trying to do was come up with a system that brought together the most crucial pieces of Islamic knowledge, so that we are able to overcome not only our own doubts, but even help others that may be having doubts. so that we are able to confidently and compassionately answer questions about Islam, whether they're coming from people of our own faith or even people outside of our faith. But I felt like that wasn't enough, because if you think about it, those are things that, if you have a question or you have a doubt, you can Google those things. But what I wanted to do was create one system that taught you not only how to communicate effectively about Islam with different audiences, but that also showed you how to level up in your own life, how to develop habits that are consistent so that you can succeed in every way, whether that's personally, professionally, academically, emotionally, all of these things in one place. And so when I talk today about strategies for success in turbulent times, I'm going to be sharing with you this exact system that I created called the 5 C's of personal growth for Muslims. And like I said, this is something that affects all areas of your life. It's a way to bring everything together into one comprehensive system so that you can be confident of your faith and be your best self, right? That's really my goal for you today. So before I jump into the 5 C's, I want to just check in quickly with everyone, and I want to make sure everybody is there and awake and paying attention. So I want to ask you a quick question. I'd like to have everybody type into the chat, tell us what is your favorite sport? And is this a sport that you like to watch or play or both? So we have 2 for soccer, Maz and Mehdi. And so Mehdi, you said you like to both watch it and play it. Hiba likes basketball. Zina said basketball as well. So we have another one for soccer and playing against Mehdi. I like that. Hockey, okay. Awesome. Anyone here a cricket fan? Or anyone know anything about cricket? No one, okay. Yeah? Traumatized by it. So yeah, I enjoy watching cricket. And back in the day when I was in high school, I loved tennis. I loved watching it, and I kind of played it. I was never good at it. I was actually pretty terrible at it, but I enjoyed that as well. Thank you. Okay, so I'm really glad to see everybody chiming in there and sharing a little bit about yourself. So I want to now jump right into the 5 C's. So like I said, this is a system that allows you to work on every area of your life, because we know that in stressful times, especially like the one we're in, it feels like there is so much that is out of our control, right? And 2020 has been the perfect example of this, in the sense of we have this raging pandemic, we have this economic crisis, we have racial inequality. And all of these things have come together this year in a way that I think none of us could have ever seen coming. And all of this can really leave you feeling very helpless, right? When you look at the situation outside, you know that there are certain things that you can do to protect yourself, but a lot of it is just outside of your control. And so I want to start this discussion by talking about a concept that I learned from Stephen Covey, which is the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. And this is going to kind of help you get in the right frame of mind for the discussion that we're about to have today. It'll really allow you to appreciate what I'm about to share with you. So Stephen Covey explained that the circle of influence is all of those things that affect us. Everything that has any impact on us, all of those things are inside of our circle of influence. Now, within the circle of influence, there's another circle that is our circle, the outer circle is the circle of concern, everything that concerns us. And then within that, there's the circle of influence. And the circle of influence contains those things that you have some control over, some influence over. Now, here's the really interesting thing that Stephen Covey taught. When we focus on the things that are within our circle of influence, that circle grows. Conversely, when we focus on the things that are in our circle of concern, but not within our influence, then our circle of concern grows and it squeezes on or takes up the space of our circle of influence. So what do we mean by that? How does that really apply in our lives? Well, what that means is that when most of our mental energy is focused on the things that we can't control, that leaves us feeling more and more helpless. On the other hand, when we focus most of our energy, and it's not about ignoring the things that are on the outside, but it's about where is our focus, right? When our focus is on the circle of influence, then what happens is we become more and more empowered. We find more and more positive outcomes in our lives, as opposed to those who are always looking at the things that they have no control over and ignoring the things that they do have control over. So number one, in terms of just this overall idea, and I'll get to the 5 C's in just a moment, but the number one thing to remember whenever you're dealing with turbulent times of any kind is to distinguish between those things that affect you, but that you have almost no influence over, versus those things that you do. And to make it a point to focus your energies on the things that you can actually do something about. And I know that this might sound really basic, but think about all the times when we get so caught up in what's happening outside in the world around us that we forget to exercise the choices that we actually do have in our individual lives. And what I hope will become clear to you by the end of this talk is that there's actually a lot of things that are within our circle of influence. And that when we properly use the choice that we have, that we can create a very positive experience for ourselves. We can create success for ourselves in every area of our life, despite what's going on the outside. So this is kind of the general framework that I want you to have in your mind as we begin and as we talk about the 5 C's. So, and one more thing I want to do before I introduce them is that I want to ask you, because this is something I like doing, is before I, share them with you, I want to kind of see where you're at with this, because clearly, if you're here, you're attending a talk on strategies for success, this is not your first time thinking about personal growth, right? This is something that you've given some thought to. This is something that, because it's important in your life, most likely you've read about it, you've studied it in some way, shape, or form. So I want to ask you, if you were coming up with the system, if you were teaching a class right now on strategies for success, and how can we as Muslims living in America, living in these difficult times, what are some things that we can do to overcome our difficulty and live our best life? What are some of the things that you would put on that list? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Self-confidence, absolutely. I like that, Hiba. That's a really important one. Compassion, yes, exactly. So, it's one thing to achieve success and just live in a bubble, and it's another thing to be able to actually go out into the world and interact with other people in a good way. And in order to do that, you need both of those things. What Hiba mentioned, which is self-confidence, and what Zina mentioned, which is compassion, right? In order to relate to people that are different than you, or even people that are Muslim but that are at a different point in their faith journey, you need to have compassion, right? If you're coming across as someone who is always annoyed at other people, can't stand differences, doesn't know how to talk to people who are different than them, then it is very difficult for you to achieve any kind of success. What are some other things that you would think of? Knowledge, absolutely. And I like, Hiba, how you distinguish where you said Islamic and secular, because I'm a firm believer in that. When I, as I mentioned, I've been studying personal growth for the last 25 years, and there's lots and lots of authors out there that are doing amazing work that we can learn from. But at the same time, if our personal growth is only done from a secular perspective, then we risk losing our the strength of our faith, right? Our iman, in order to keep it intact, we have to invest in our Islamic knowledge as well. And that's why, for me, even late in life, after I had already gotten my bachelor's and my master's, and I had worked in the corporate world for many years. I had worked in education and higher education. After all of that, I decided to go back to school to study my faith. So definitely Islamic knowledge is very, very important. It's a crucial piece of this whole puzzle. And in order to gain Islamic knowledge in a way that is beneficial to us, we have to have comprehensive knowledge, right? So we don't want to just study one area in particular, but we want to be able to have an appreciation for all of the key Islamic sciences. So whether that's fiqh or tafsir or hadith or any of those, we have to be able to have at least a basic understanding of what each of these are so that we can see how all of those parts fit together to form a beautiful whole. What are some other things that you would include in a system that teaches Muslims how to be unapologetically Muslim while living their best life? And think about, I want you to think about three things. So when I was doing my master's in educational technology, one of the things that I learned that really stood out for me was that in order to gain competency in any area, a person needs three things. You need knowledge, you need skills, and you need a certain set of attitudes. So those were called the KSAs: knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So I'm sharing that with you to kind of give you a hint of, think about things that would fall within those three areas, that if you were designing a program, what would you include in it? So we said, self-confidence, compassion, Islamic knowledge, secular knowledge. What are some other things? And think specifically as a Muslim in America today. If you are going to thrive as a Muslim in America today, be successful personally, professionally, what are some of the skills that you might need to have? Exactly. So that you're exactly right. Being able to communicate and listen, that is so important, right? What I often see happening with a lot of Muslims who are proud and practicing Muslims is that they feel, and this is a very prevalent myth that we have in our community, and that is that in order to practice your faith properly, in order to be a proud and practicing Muslim, that you have to isolate yourself from other people. Does anyone ever hear that or experience that? Yeah. So, and I believe that this is a myth that we have to overcome. I believe that it's entirely possible for Muslims to hold on to their faith and be very confident of their faith, but at the same time, to be engaged in the world around them. We want to be engaged without getting absorbed by it, right? So in order to do that, what's one of the key skills that you need? One of the key skills is being able to communicate. And I would add being able to communicate effectively. I like, Soda, how you added in there listening, because having knowledge is important. Being able to communicate it effectively is important. But a lot of times we forget the power of listening, right? We get ready to, share everything we learn when someone asks us a question. We sometimes do like a brain dump, basically, but we don't take the time to listen to that person and find out where they're at right now. What are they struggling with, right? Because if we don't take the time to listen, then even if we have knowledge, even if we're a good communicator, we're not going to get across to the other person. We have to first understand where they're coming from if we're going to give them an answer that is really going to benefit them and really answer the question that they came to us with, right? And this is true whether the person you're speaking to is a fellow Muslim or someone of another background, because no matter who we are, anytime we're engaging with a subject that is as sensitive and controversial as Islam in America today, there's always going to be a set of assumptions. There's always going to be that baggage of, what are you bringing to the table? And so listening is how you unpack that. It's how you figure out, where is this person at? What is the perspective that they're asking this question from? And then when you do give an answer, it lands. It actually makes an impact. So that's really important. There's two things in particular that I haven't seen yet that I'm waiting for still. So again, I want to ask those of you who haven't chimed in yet, I want you to really think about this and give it your best shot. There's lots of things that one could say here, but I really want to hear from you. If you were designing a program for strategies for success for American Muslims, what are some of the things that you would include in that program? Again, we're asking, what are the things that we need to know? What are the attitudes we need to have? And what are the skills we need to have? So I'll give you another moment or so to see if there's anything else you want to add, and then I will get right into sharing the 5 C's. So does anybody else have any other ideas of what might go in that list? Think spiritually. So spiritually, what would you say is the number one thing that we need as Muslims? So Maz said, how to not act differently around non-Muslims, staying true to your iman. That's a really big one. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Maz, because one of the challenges that American Muslims face is that when we go out into the world and we want to either show up at work, we want to get more involved in our jobs, or we want to start volunteering for a cause, that we care about. One of the things that sometimes happens is we end up compromising our beliefs because we're afraid that if we don't adopt the beliefs of the political spectrum that we identify with, that we're not going to be accepted. And so this is a real risk because what in the US we know that Muslims politically tend to align more with those on the left, though they tend to be more accepting of minorities, including Muslims. So that's a logical partnership. But there is also a danger in that our views socially, we tend to be conservative. And so when we align with groups that are on the left, sometimes we feel pressured to take on all of their ideologies. And instead, what we really need to be able to do is understand what our faith teaches us and then be more selective in the causes that we choose to get involved in and how we choose to get involved in those causes. So staying true to our faith when we are surrounded by people of other backgrounds. And this isn't just for activists or volunteers. This could even show up in our jobs, right? So if you're hanging out with your coworkers after work one day, you all go to the coffee shop together or whatever, and just the casual conversations that sometimes come up. When you're in an environment with your work colleagues, there can be some pressure, right, to agree with other people and to not stand out and to not have your own opinions. So it takes quite a bit of steadfastness. It takes a bit of knowledge, and it takes good communication skills as well to be able to interact with people, but also stay true to who you are. And then Mehdi said, not being afraid to worship in public. Yeah, so we don't want to simply abandon our salah because we happen not to be at home, right? And this is an issue that some people face when they're at work, right? So how do I ask for a room where I can pray? Or how do I, leave the meeting early? Or how do I tell someone, to schedule the meeting so that I can go for Jummah? How do I have these conversations? So these are all skills, very real skills that as Muslims in America, if we're gonna thrive, if we're gonna succeed, we've gotta have the ability to have these conversations. So that was excellent. I really, really admire all the answers that you guys gave. You guys are totally on the right track. And I think that you are definitely ready to go to this next step and learn what this framework is and be able to apply it in your lives. So the first C in the framework that I teach, the 5 C's of personal growth for Muslims, is connect with Allah. So I'll go ahead and type it here. First C is connect with Allah. Now here what I mean is understanding the names and attributes of Allah, because until we know Allah, how can we worship Him? How can we love Him? How can we obey Him, right? We need to first know Him. So we study who He is, what His names and attributes are, and this allows us to really develop a much stronger connection with Allah. One of the myths that we often see especially in young Muslims, and this unfortunately comes about because of how we're often taught about Islam and about Allah, is that Allah is angry with you. That because you've done this or that sin or mistake that you're unforgivable. We spend so much time teaching kids about the hellfire and not enough time teaching them about Jannah. We spend so much time, scaring people about the wrath of Allah and not nearly enough time teaching them about the mercy of Allah. And so this ends up being one of the reasons that pushes a lot of people to have those doubts about their faith. On the surface, it might seem that they're providing all of these logical reasons, but deep down, it often comes from a place where you're just angry at Allah because you're assuming He's angry at you. And so getting to know who Allah really is, to me, is the very first step. It's the very first thing that we need to prioritize and spend our energy on, is connecting with Allah. This also involves being able to debunk the arguments that are often given against the existence of God. So we live in a society that is highly secular. All of you, because you're in school, we know that academia tends to be very atheist leaning. So for many of you, you may have had professors who are atheists, and not only that they are atheists personally, but that when they teach their subjects, they sort of push that in their classes as well. And the idea there is that, well, I'm an academic, or I'm someone who believes in science, therefore there's no room for a God, right? How many times do we hear that? Right, exactly. So the whole theory of evolution as well. And so that's a tricky one, because there are, the science of evolution itself has evolved quite a bit since its early days. And so as Muslims, we need to be well versed in those logical arguments in order to be able to defend our faith and protect our iman. In the past, this was more the realm of philosophy. And if you were a specialized person, or if you were a scholar, only then would you study these arguments against atheism. But the fact of the matter is that in today's age, especially living in this country, especially as college students, we absolutely need the tools to be able to refute those arguments in a logical and rational way. And when we study deeply the arguments that atheists and secularists and scientists and empiricists and others put forward for their beliefs in refuting any religion, not just Islam, but just any belief in God at all, we find that they're actually very illogical. But most people of faith in regular encounters are unable to refute them because they just haven't studied those arguments. And so for me, I really believe that it is one of the very basic areas of knowledge that Muslims in America need today, is how do you refute the arguments against the existence of God? And one of the biggest ones is the problem of evil and suffering. How do you reconcile that God is just and loving and merciful and all-powerful and all-knowing with the fact that evil and suffering exist? And there's a very logical answer to that. And so learning about that is, to me, part of the first C, which is connect with Allah. Now, the second C is what I call care for yourself. And what I mean here is I'm talking specifically about your mental and emotional health. We know that one of the things we know from neuroscience and from psychology is that the way our minds work is that we tend to believe that the way we feel, we're feeling it because of what's happening around us. Whereas the reality is that our feelings come from thought in the moment. This is how one of my coaches says it, Catherine Jones, that our feelings come from our thought in the moment. The day that you are able to really absorb and understand this reality is the day that your own relationship to your feelings and your thoughts changes completely. You're no longer a prisoner of your thoughts and your feelings. The moment you understand this very, very crucial dynamic. And as long as you don't understand it, you are attributing the way you feel to what's happening outside of you. And you will always be a prisoner, even if situations improve, because there will always be something to pull you down. So if we are going to be resilient, if we're going to deal with all the stresses that exist in our lives, not just right now in 2020, 2020 has just been a perfect example of this, but really just in life in general, whether that's stress from school and keeping up with your classes, or that's, you know, any health issues that you might have, or financial issues, or worries about the future and choices about your profession, or issues you may be having in your family, or any of those things, or all of the above. If we don't have a solid understanding of how the mind works, and we don't have daily practices in place that help us deal with this negative thinking, then nothing else we could possibly do is going to help us succeed. And so right behind the first C, which is connect with Allah, which is the number one most important thing we need, the very next thing is, how do we deal with our negative feelings? And so one of the things that I teach, and I have a program that I'm going to tell you about at the end today, is the practice of meditation. Not from any sort of religious perspective, but purely from a mental health perspective. How can we use the simple practice of sitting and breathing and getting in tune with our body and our breath as a way to clear our mind and, unclutch that strong grip that our negative thoughts have over us? How can we stop being a prisoner of the way we feel and the thoughts that happen across our minds? How can we master our emotions? This is something that is very, very important. And it's what I teach in the second C. So the second C is care for yourself. The third C, and this is the one that in my program we spend the most time on, the third C is, and after this I'll check in with you again, as I did earlier. This one is commit to your growth. And what I mean by this is, in this part of my program, I teach you to look at your life as it stands right now in 6 key areas. So we look at your life and we look at how well things are working for you. And I help you set some goals for yourself. Because again, this goes back to the idea of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence. This is where we're really getting deep into the circle of influence. And we're saying, I choose to focus my energy on the things that are most within my control, most within my influence. And those are the daily choices that I make about every area of our life. That includes your choices, your religious choices, so how you perform your obligations and your voluntary worship. It includes relationships. It includes your health. It includes your home. It includes your work or school. And then finally, the 6th one is wealth, how we manage our money and our finances. So all 6 of these areas are crucial to leading a well-balanced, satisfying life. And if we just look at these from a secular perspective, there's a lot out there that we can learn from. But what I do in the program, and what is unique and what I don't think that you'll find anywhere else, is that I teach these from an Islamic perspective, right? So how do we live our lives in a balanced way so that we are achieving success without burning out and without compromising our faith? That's really the crux of what these 5 C's are all about. And so in this part of the program, we go deep into each of these 6 areas of your life. And what I help you do is I help you unpack where you're at, where you'd like to be, and what are some small steps you can take to get there. Now, one of the things I want to share with you today that can make a huge difference for you when it comes to goal setting is the major misconception that people have about short and long-term goals, and that is this. People tend to underestimate what they can do in the long run, and they tend to overestimate what they can do in the short run. If you simply correct for this one misconception, you'll find that you'll be so much more effective in setting your goals. And so what does that mean? What that means is that when we try to imagine what we can achieve in the long term, most of us don't give ourselves enough credit. We think way too small. But on the other hand, when we try to set our daily habits, we go overboard and we make things very hard for ourselves. And so I just saw a message from one person who just joined. Wa alaikum assalam, Mornina. Thank you so much for being here. And so when we set our short-term goals, we tend to go overboard and we choose goals that are way too hard. So if you want to be more effective in choosing habits for yourself, remember to make your long-term goals much bigger than what you think you're capable of. It should be things that when you share them with somebody right now, they would almost laugh because they would find them to be so out there, right? That's how you know that you've challenged yourself enough with your long-term goals. But on the other hand, your short-term goals should be things that are very easy and achievable. They should be things that without too much effort, you can easily do every single day. Now, one question that you might ask is, like dream duas, exactly. So one question you might ask with this is, Sister Aisha, how is it possible for me to have really tiny and easy short-term goals, but then achieve these massive long-term goals, right? You might find that there's a disconnect there. And that's why I think a lot of people choose such big goals for their daily goals, because they think that that's the only way they can achieve anything long-term. But that's actually a really huge fallacy that we have. And the answer to that in a single word is consistency. What you can achieve if you are simply consistent is unbelievable. You can overcome so many obstacles and achieve the greatest long-term goals if all you do is stay consistent. And we know that there's a hadith about this, right? That the best actions are those that are done consistently, even if they're small. So we have this wisdom in our own faith, and it's 100% true when it comes to personal growth and goal setting. So that's the key thing that I want you to understand from the third C, which is commit to your growth. Always think really big, much bigger than what you think you can currently do when it comes to your long-term goals, but make your short-term goals super easy so that you don't even need a habit tracker. It's a no-brainer that this is something you can do every day. So with that, I want to take another quick pause and just want to check in with you guys, because I know that was a lot of content. I want to keep it kind of light and make sure everyone is still engaged. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about that at the end, inshallah, definitely. So at this time, I want to ask everybody to type in the chat, please. Share with us some of the cities that you've lived in, and then what is your favorite city? So your favorite city can be one that you've lived in or just one that you visited. So share with me some of the cities that you've lived in. And I'll put mine in here too. So I've lived in Doha, Dubai, and Virginia. Houston, New York, Michigan. Okay, Kissimmee, Florida. Awesome. Canton, okay. Yeah, I'm in Canton right now as well. Fellow Cantonite. UK, okay. And who wants to, Miami, Florida, awesome. Who wants to share their favorite city in the world? What's your favorite city? I think I have a couple. I'm gonna say Washington, DC is one of my favorite cities. Medina, yes, of course. Long Island, New York, Mississauga, and you liked your experience in Mississauga. Yeah, huge Muslim population there, right? London, awesome. Tokyo, I would love to go to Japan one day. I am mesmerized by Japanese art. I went to an Asian art museum, I think it was in DC a couple of years ago, and ever since then, I've just been mesmerized. So I'd love to make a trip to Japan. Istanbul, yes, oh my God, Istanbul is so beautiful. And Hasna said Istanbul as well. Yeah, we visited Istanbul in end of 2014, right before, so we were living in Dubai for a few years, and that was one of our last major trips before we moved back to the US in 2015. Istanbul, yeah, it's a really, really beautiful city, mashallah. The mom, yeah. So the mom is actually Sultana. That's where I met my husband over 26 years ago. Yeah, I'd love to go back to Istanbul too. Istanbul is such a beautiful city. It has so much charm. Really, really beautiful. Okay, so now we've covered the first 3 C's. Can anyone repeat back to me what those were? What were the first 3 C's before I share the last 2 with you? Oh yeah, everyone keeps telling me I need to watch that, and I haven't watched it yet. So who can tell me what the first 3 C's were? What was the first one? Yep, so Hiba got the first 2, connect with Allah and care for yourself. And what was the third one? Who remembers the third C? Commit to your growth. Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Awesome, Zina. Wonderful. Yeah, so connect with Allah, care for yourself, and commit to your growth. So now the 4th C that I'm going to share with you, and there's 2 more. The 4th C is communicate effectively. And this is where in my program, I teach you how to communicate not only with people of other faiths and backgrounds, but even with your fellow Muslims. Because one of the things that I've learned is that sometimes the most challenging questions about Islam actually come from Muslims who are struggling with Islam. And so we need to have the knowledge, obviously the Islamic knowledge, so that we can intelligently answer those questions. But then we also need to have the communication skills so that we know how to get our point across, depending on the specific audience that we're talking to. And so this is a very, very important skill. And to me, it's a fundamental skill. That's why it's part of the 5 C's that no Muslim in America should be without, right? And so learning how to communicate about Islam and Muslims, whether that's with Muslim audiences or audiences of other faiths, that could be people who come from a different faith background, so Christians or Hindus or Jews or anyone else, as well as, yeah, so important, right? As well as people who identify as atheist or agnostic or secularist or any of the other ists or isms, right? So knowing your audience, right? Listening to people, finding out and trying to uncover what are the assumptions that they're making. You know, for example, when you have the question, this is probably the most common question I get from young Muslim girls. They'll come to me after a talk and say, Sister Aisha, I got this question about hijab. You know, and this is what my teacher said to me, or this is what my friend said to me, and how would you answer that? It's a very common question. Now, when someone asks you about hijab or about any aspect of Islam, the first thing you have to understand is who is asking the question, right? Because imagine this, a young Muslim girl who is struggling with the choice of whether or not to wear it, who's asking about hijab, is coming from a very different place than, say, your non-Muslim coworker who's asking about it, right? Even though the question on the surface might be the exact same, the perspective of each of those people is different and therefore requires a different approach. And so Munira just said that I was speaking to my Catholic friend about this today. Alhamdulillah, she said she was going to read the Quran today that I got her. That's awesome. That's wonderful that you took that, you know, that you took that question and that you offered her a chance to study the book for herself, right? So I really like that. And yeah, this is one of the, probably the one, like I said, one of the most common questions. And sometimes because it's so common, we oversimplify it, or we just give the same answer to anyone who asks without really realizing where the person is coming from, right? For people of other faiths, their objection to the hijab has much less to do about the cloth itself and a lot more to do about what they believe it represents. And if we don't get that, then we're going to go in the totally wrong direction and give them totally useless information that isn't really dealing with the actual assumptions that they have, right? One of the things that we do Exactly. So our answer needs to be catered for who is asking, right? And the other tip that I want to share with you here is that you don't want to do a brain dump. A lot of times we feel like we have to tell the person every fiqh detail we know about that topic. And that's really not what they're looking for. What they're looking for is usually much, much simpler than that. And I'll tell you, that's even the case often when the question seems like a very specific one. So this is where in my program, I actually do role playing, where I pair you up with other people and I have you practice answering common questions about Islam for different audiences. So you'll role play a young Muslim girl who's asking a question, or you'll role play an older neighbor who is an atheist who's asking that question, and so on. And so this gives you the hands-on practice that you need in order to be able to handle these kind of situations. So, and they need compassion. Exactly, that's so important. You know, in my work with Unapologetically Muslim, one of the things that thank you. I'm so glad to hear you say that. Alhamdulillah. I'm excited too, really. I really am. This is something I've been working on for the last several years. And, you know, this is, I believe, something that is really missing in our learning today that I really believe Muslims need. I hope every Muslim in America, you know, I hope to reach every Muslim in America with these 5 C's and to teach everyone I can get my hands on, because I think it's that important. Compassion is very important. And so when we are communicating about Islam and Muslims, we need to have a balance between maintaining our confidence and our integrity, but also being compassionate and kind. What often happens is we end up in one of two extremes. Either we are so confident about what we believe that we come off as being kind of rigid and demeaning to the other person, even if we don't mean to be. On the other hand, if our focus is primarily on trying to be nice, then sometimes we will kind of fudge the truth a little bit because we are so desperate for that person to like our answer. And so one of the important tips that I want to leave you with in this section is that when you are having a conversation with someone about Islam and Muslims, you are not there for the purpose of obtaining their approval. You're not there to get someone's approval for you to be Muslim. You're there to help inform them in a way that reflects your confidence and your compassion, which is what Islam teaches you, right? To share wisdom in the best way. But by no means are you beholden to that other person giving you their approval for you to practice your own faith. So that's where mindset plays a really important role in communicating effectively. It's not just having the knowledge, it's not just knowing how to speak effectively, but it's also, you know, we talked about assumptions, right? And being aware of the assumptions that other people are bringing to the conversation. Well, we also have to be aware of our own assumptions. When I'm having this interaction with this person, what is my assumption? And so once we get clear on that, we can be a lot more balanced in our approach, and we're able to give people, you know, the answers that they're looking for without finding ourselves in a position where we're compromising our own beliefs. And Munira said that we really need this, especially as women and as mothers, because women get asked so many questions as we are stereotyped. We need training so that we are not giving the wrong message about Islam. Munira, what you said is so powerful. And I remember, it reminds me of a training that I attended, I think it was last year. It was called Faith Over Fear. And this training was done by an organization called Shoulder to Shoulder. And by the way, so that I'm looking at the time now. I haven't been doing a great job of staying on top of the time, but I hope it's okay if we go just a little bit over. I'm going to try not to go way too long, but we might end up going just a little bit past 7 if that's okay. So in the training called Faith Over Fear, thank you, Jazakallah Khair. One of the things, so this was training done by Shoulder to Shoulder, which educates people of other faith communities on how they can help combat Islamophobia. So I was actually the only Muslim that attended that. All the others were Christian and Jewish faith leaders who wanted to understand how they could help combat this issue of Islamophobia. And one of the things that we learned that really, really struck me, and I think this was data that was shared by an organization called Rethink Media, if I'm not mistaken. There were several organizations that presented there at that training. But one of the things I learned is that the most prevalent stereotype about Islam in America is that Islam oppresses women. This is even more prevalent than the stereotype related to violence, number one. And number two, this stereotype about Islam oppressing women was even prevalent within about 30% of the people who self-describe as Democrats. Now, we know that generally speaking in America, people who are on the left, who are Democrats, they tend to be far more accepting of other faiths, including Islam. But even 3 out of 10 people that identified as Democrats admitted that they held this stereotype. So we have a lot of work to do. Oh, thank you, Munira. That's really kind of you. Appreciate that. I love being there, by the way. You guys have a wonderful community at IAGD. It was really nice to be there with you. So this, like you said, Munira, this issue of, stereotypes about women is very important. And again, like I shared with you, according to the research, it is the #1 stereotype about Islam amongst Americans. So absolutely, we need to do a better job of being able to answer questions related to women in Islam. And it's one of those areas that requires really specific training, right? It's really important that we get that right, because every one of us is likely to get asked questions about that. And even the brothers who are here, it's not just a topic that women need to be well-versed in, but even, I'd love to hear from any of the guys who are here, if you've ever been in a situation where you've been asked a question related to women in Islam, and, is that something that you've ever had to deal with, and was that a struggle for you? Okay, and then while I wait for that, the last C, so the 5th C, is contribute. And what I mean here is this. Let's see if I can type. We know as Muslims that Allah did not simply create us to eat, sleep, work, and even pray. We are here not only to worship Allah, but also to serve our fellow human beings. We're here to serve our fellow Muslims, our fellow Americans, humanity at large, and even the planet itself, right? This is not something that we have to add on to Islam because we happen to live in America. This is something that is part of Islam. And so that's why it is one of my 5 C's of personal growth. As Muslims, we need to find ways to give back to our communities, whether that's through some formal volunteer role, or even informally, helping other people in our neighborhood, in our families, any of those things. But our lives cannot only be about meeting our needs and achieving success for ourselves personally. So interfaith, that's a great example. Volunteering at a food bank, excellent example as well. So in some way, shape, or form, as Muslims in America, it is crucial that we find ways to give back. Now, in this part of the program, there's 2 things specifically that I like to talk about, because I find that these are 2 of the biggest issues that Muslims often face when they get involved in volunteer work. The first one is activism burnout, and the second one is compromising your faith when you're working together with people from different backgrounds. If we want to be effective in our volunteer efforts, if we want to give back to the causes that we love and care so much about, we have to make sure that we are taking care of our own needs so that we don't burn out. You know, how many times have you seen people who are activists and they're such good people and they want to do good in the world, but they overextend themselves, they burn out, they get stressed out, they get overwhelmed, and then nothing is working well for them, right? That happens, right, so often. And so this is a big risk, if you will, that we need to learn to mitigate. We have to, on the one hand, get outside of our comfort zone and go out into our communities and volunteer and get involved. But at the same time, we need to do it in a balanced way where we are not sacrificing our needs, our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health, and especially our spirituality in order to do that. And then, so the other one was, when we are partnering with people of other backgrounds to achieve common goals, we need to be able to have the confidence to hold fast to our own faith. Our objective when we get involved, whether that's politically or on social causes or any causes, is that we want to advance the ideals that we believe in, right, as Muslims. We want our volunteer work to have a divine and a spiritual component to it. We want it to be something that's pleasing to Allah. And so, like everything else in our lives, in order for it to be pleasing to Allah, it has to meet two criteria. We have to do it for Allah and by Allah. And what I mean by that is, for Allah means for the sake of Allah. So we're not just doing it to look good. We're not just doing it to impress people. We're not doing it to gain something that is just worldly, but we're doing it to please Allah. And then by Allah means that we need to do it in accordance with the rules and the boundaries that Allah has given us, right? So if we are going outside of these two things, then there is no longer a spiritual component. It is no longer something that is beneficial to us. And it happens all too easily. So these are the two things, the two tips that I want you to remember when it comes to this area of contributing, that you want to avoid activism burnout by making sure that you take care of your own needs, your self-care. And secondly, that you are well enough versed in your own faith that when you get out there and you interact with people who are different than you, that you are able to remain centered in your own faith tradition. So I want to now share with you really quick. Let's see if I have this up. So can everyone see my screen there? Oh, and you know what happens when I share a screen? I wish I knew a way around this. I can no longer see the chat. Oh, here we go.
We can see the screen.
You can see it, good, okay. So here's just a summary. And so if you didn't get a chance to write them down as I was going through them, here's your chance now to kind of make a note of these and find ways that you can start to implement these in your life, okay? So again, our goal here is that we want to be unapologetically Muslim while also living our best life. And so that is what these 5 C's help you do. Now, those of you who are here, I want to ask you a question. So now that you've learned all of these, how many of you would like some help in implementing this in your own lives? If you think that this would be helpful to you, put a 1 in the chat. Obviously, you know, we know that these are some general principles, and I see a lot of you, Maryam, Hasna, Rehan, Soda, Munira, all of you have said yes to that. This is something that we can only benefit from when we actually implement it, right? And so what I've done for you is I've actually created, and this is the first time ever that I'm sharing this anywhere. You guys are the first group of people to be learning about this, is a program that I've developed that shows you exactly how to do all 5 of these things. So I've developed a really easy program that goes into detail on all of these. And I want to just show that to you really quick. Let's see. Okay, so I closed. All right. So let me share my screen here. And so this program is called The Strong Believer, a new personal growth program for Muslims. And what this program does, it's a very condensed 8-day intensive program where I go in and I work with you as a group and also one-on-one. So it's not a lecture series, it's a coaching program where we meet online for an hour a day. It starts on December 23rd and it goes until December 30th from 8 to 9 p.m. We meet online, and then I also have a Google Doc, a separate one for each person in the program. And that is where you do your exercises each day, and I give you personalized feedback on your answers. So that's what makes this program really, really powerful, is that individual component. So this program, again, is based on my 5 C's of personal growth for Muslims. It's an 8-day program, and what it'll help you do is end 2020 on a high note. We know we all need that. And start 2021 as your best self. And if you go to personalgrowthformuslims.eventbrite.com, you'll see this page, which is live now. And it goes into all the details of what we are going to be covering in this program. And this program, again, like I said, is not a lecture series. So it's not 8 days of you listening to me talk. It's actually an interactive program where we're going to have discussion, we're going to do role playing, and you each will get a link to your own Google Doc where I will personally provide you with feedback on your goals and your reflections on each of these areas. So we can be certain that you are learning everything that you need to learn, and more importantly, that you are in a position to implement it. So once again, these are all the details. We meet online using Zoom. It's every day from 8 to 9 p.m., December 23rd to the 30th. And I specifically chose those dates because I wanted it to be after you guys are done with finals. And this is a small group program. Like I said, I'm going to be giving individual feedback to each person. And so once we reach 20 people, the enrollment will close. Now, for those of you who are here today, I have a really special offer, especially for you. If you go to this page, and again, that's personalgrowthformuslims.eventbrite.com. If you go here and then you click the link to enroll, you will find this option here where it says tickets, and you'll click on that. And then it'll give you the opportunity to put in a promo code. Now, the promo code that I've created especially for you is UMDMSA. And once you apply that code, you will see that it will take $50 off of the admission price. So the regular cost of this program is $149. However, for all of you who are here, you can access the same program for $99, which is an excellent, excellent deal at either of those prices. And on top of that, I have one amazing bonus that I'm adding on as well, just for the people who sign up today. For those who sign up today, you will also get 4 coaching calls from me throughout next year. So next year, every 3 months, I will reach out to you and we will have a coaching call where I will be speaking with you one-on-one and checking in on how you're doing with your personal goals that you developed in the program. So this is your opportunity to have an accountability partner. What I'll be doing is I'll be checking in to see, which of your goals are you doing well with and have you mastered. I'll help you write your next set of goals for those areas. In the areas that you might be struggling a bit, I'll help you diagnose what's going on there and then adjust the goals so that you can have more achievable goals, right? So whether you're doing well or not doing well, I'll be there with you to help you along, to be your accountability partner, and to help solve any issues that you might have along the way. And so these are 4 coaching calls that you will get completely free if you sign up today. Anyone who signs up by 11:59 p.m. will get access to these coaching calls. And this is really a game changer. Anytime you're working on your personal growth, having an opportunity to have some accountability, to have someone there one-on-one that is going to work with you, really can change the whole thing for you. So I really encourage you to take advantage of that. And at this time, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those, answer any questions you may have. Go ahead.
Is the program only for college students?
The program is not only for college students, so anyone can join. I would say that probably small children, it may not be the most suited for, but high school and up, anyone is welcome to join. And the promo code that I've shared with you, which again is UMDMSA, you're welcome to share that with your friends and family. I have no issue with that. Okay, so I am well over my time, so I'm going to go ahead and close it there. Personalgrowthformuslims.eventbrite.com is the website. I look forward to seeing all of you in the program. Subhanaka wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Back over to you, Soda.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
so Jazakallah khair, Sister Aisha. That was a very wonderful speech and reminder, inshallah. And hopefully for the people who are planning to take the class, you know, this is just like a taste of what she'll be teaching you guys. So please do register, inshallah, for that. If you can't register, then then if you know someone who is free in the break, you know, let them know about this wonderful opportunity, inshallah. Other than that, we do have some of our own events coming up, so look out for those in the group chat, inshallah. And with that, I think there was a question. If you can't make it to this session, are you planning to have more sessions like this?
So I actually do not have any other sessions scheduled at this time. My plan after this class is over is to get back to the book that I've been working on. So I'm actually writing a book on the 5 C's. And so that's going to be my singular focus once the class is done. And then at some point after that, I'll be, you know, inshallah, offering it again. But for now, this is the only session that is available. And the enrollment, again, will close as soon as 20 people join, because I don't want to have a very large group. I want to be able to give each person that individualized attention.
Okay, jazakallah khairan. Once again, guys, this is a wonderful opportunity, so please do take advantage of it, inshallah. With that,
Rayhan, there's one last thing I forgot to mention, and this is really important.
Yeah.
When you use that promo code, I will be donating a portion of your enrollment back to your MSA. So the University of Michigan Dearborn MSA will receive a portion of every single enrollment that use the promo code UMDMSA. So that's another benefit. It's a win-win. You get to, you know, join the program for a discounted price, and your MSA also benefits as well. So I hope you'll take advantage of that.
Jazakumullah khairan. All right, with that we'll close up. So أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروا إنه غفور رحيم. جزاكم الله خيرا, Sister Aisha, and of course everyone who attended this evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.